Hello, everyone, and welcome to our insightful series on eye health and technology. Today, we're diving into the fascinating world of optics and aberrations, and it's a lot that we can cover. I'm Doug Koch, and I have the great pleasure of hosting this session, especially that I have with me Zaina Al-Mohtaseb, who's going to help us unravel some of these complex concepts in lens technology. Welcome, Zaina. It's great to have you here.
Thank you so much, Doug. It's a pleasure to be here and share insights on these important topics, and I'm glad to be here with you specifically about this.
So today we're going to cover several areas. Zaina's going to talk about the concept of spherical and chromatic aberrations, ABBE numbers and their real-world effect on visual quality, and other topics that are really crucial regarding lens designs. And again, there's so much that we can cover, so it'll be fun to kind of try to unpack all of this.
That's right, Doug. And it's also important when we're talking about this, discussing residual refractive error and how that can influence patient satisfaction. And the reason for that is, we can be talking about higher order aberrations, but if we're getting lower order aberration issues, that's going to be much more of an issue in these patients and what their happiness.
Sounds like my day in clinic. Absolutely. Okay, so we're going to explore the differences between various monofocal optic designs, aspheric, enhanced monofocals, and we're also going to delve a little bit into some of the other IOL designs, such as EDOF and multifocal, trifocal designs.
And we can't forget about the correlation between the design of an IOL and its visual quality. It's also a fascinating aspect that really goes unnoticed.
And finally, we're going to touch a little bit about manufacturing processes and how they have evolved and how they affect vision quality with these lenses.
And I'm excited to dive into these topics and share my knowledge with our viewers. It's going to be an informative session, so stay tuned.
All right, so let's get started. And what I'd like to do is first ask you a little bit about spherical aberration in IOLs. What is it? What is the impact of it? And why are we talking about it?
Yeah. So spherical aberration is a kind of higher order aberrations that actually occurs because the light rays are actually refracted and focused differently, whether it's through the center of the lens or the outside of the lens. And if we think about the cornea has a positive spherical aberration profile, which means that the peripheral light rays are focused more anteriorly than the central light rays, and it's in front of the retina. What's interesting about our eye is that the lens actually has a negative spherical aberration that compensates for that positive spherical aberration. And another important point is that cornea pretty much stays steady throughout your life. But as you age, you have more and more positive spherical aberration in the lens, especially as cataracts start to develop. So that's one point that's kind of important to get the background before we really start talking about it and the importance of treating it. And then after that, when you think about sort of taking out the lens and then inserting a lens, in the past, we used to talk about, we had spherical IOLs in which the curvature of the lens was pretty much the same. So then you still had positive spherical aberrations in the intraocular lens. So when you put that in and you get magnified of spherical aberrations of the cornea, then you started noticing that there was some potentially glare or halos, or the quality of vision wasn't the same. And that's even more magnified in patients that have maybe bigger pupils, for example, or resultant refractive error.
Yeah, it's very interesting that you raise that point, because the first thing, going back to your comment about the crystalline lens, is really interesting, because as we lose the negative spherical aberration, like you mentioned, we also are becoming presbyopic. Mm-hmm. So it actually gives you a little depth of focus, even though it's doing what the things you said about quality of vision.
Well, and that's a really important point. So, we don't use spherical lenses as much anymore, right? We've all really transitioned mostly to aspheric lenses. We forget that the spherical lenses actually did give us extended depth of focus. Now we're talking about how do we gain back that depth of focus, or how do we gain back that reading vision, but the spherical lens did give that. So really everything is a sort of a balance. You're gaining certain things and then taking something back. And another point I wanted maybe also to get your thoughts about it is, you have these aspheric lenses that can sort of make up for that positive spherical aberration, and it's not all the same. So you have varying negative spherical aberrations in these intraocular lens based on the manufacturer. You even have lenses that are zero spherical aberrations. Do we really know what the right outcome of spherical aberration in a person's eye? I mean, obviously it matters based on the person. It matters based on, the residual refractive error based on the pupil. But it's just so hard to say how much is that. We know it's clinically important, but where is the right number?
That's so true. The zero spherical aberration lenses are nice because of the uniformity of power. They may not provide as much extended depth of focus as a positive spherical aberration. Do they provide a little bit more than an eye who has an IOL with negative spherical aberration, completely correcting the cornea? And how much you raise the point of the pupil, that's so key, because as we get older, our pupils get smaller. How big a deal is it really for spherical aberration? My own thought about the zero spherical aberration lenses, I think they're great, and I especially like them in eyes that have a lot of aberrations in the cornea, so that you're not introducing extra aberrations in the implant. Do I have any science to back that up? No, but I think it makes sense anyway.
No, it does. And also we have to take into consideration decentration. Maybe those patients that have zonular loss, because if you have aspheric lenses, that can be more of an issue versus zero spherical aberration lenses, for example. The other part that I sometimes utilize this is patients that have had myopic or hyperopic LASIK. Truly, I try in patients that have hyperopic LASIK to put a zero spherical aberration lens or even a positive spherical aberration lens. But do you really change sort of your lens choice other than maybe in that particular instance, would you say?
Yeah, I usually don't. And actually in those hyperopic LASIK patients, I always measure the corneal spherical aberration, and then I key off that because a lot of them actually have kind of no spherical aberration at all. They just got enough hyperopic LASIK effect to get rid of the positive spherical aberration of the cornea. So there are different amounts of negative spherical aberration of IOLs. Tell us a little bit about that and your thoughts about that.
Yeah, so I think it's nice because we have a variety of negative spherical aberration that you can potentially, especially now that we can actually measure higher order aberrations and actual negative spherical aberrations of the patient, you could potentially pick the IOL. The J&J platform, the Technis platform, has the most negative spherical aberration lens that's out there. The B&L has a zero spherical aberration lens, and then the Alcon is sort of in the middle in terms of the spherical aberration. That's how I view it. I usually do like to do the zero spherical aberration lens in those post-hyperopic LASIK, but I don't know if I really personally actually utilize that choice at this point, because even though theoretically it makes a difference and there is good data to show it, I don't know if I've really clinically noticed an improvement based on that.
Okay, yes, interesting. So maybe that keys us then to talk about other aspects of optical design. What about chromatic aberration, ABBE numbers? Is that a big deal, or tell us about that?
So chromatic aberration has come up because now there's new technology lenses that actually are decrease the chromatic aberration. So chromatic aberrations is the way to think about it, is that light is split and differently based on the wavelength of light and the color of light. And so the ABBE number really shows the dispersion of light that occurs as a result of that. So you have lenses that have high chromatic aberrations, have low ABBE numbers, and vice versa. And that's also inversely related to refractive index of the IOL. And that's been a new way to get an extended depth of focus. So, we'll talk a little bit about sort of the new IOL technologies and monofocal versus enhanced depth of focus. But, potentially treating the chromatic aberrations can give you better visual acuity and quality of vision, and maybe avoiding some of those, maybe a rainbow effect at the edge of lenses that people notice.
Yeah, it's interesting to talk about that. It's hard to know what to do with that whole topic, but probably it makes more sense or more relevance in IOLs that are already dividing the light, like multifocals, EDOFs, as you suggested. So let's talk now, let's kind of segue. We've talked about optical design based on spherical aberration. What are these enhanced monofocals about? And give us your thoughts on those.
Yeah. So, monofocal lenses, they've been great because you have that one focus plane. It really does give you the highest contrast sensitivity, the best outcome in terms of visual outcome. But really, what's the compromise there? Is ability for intermediate or for reading. And that's what patients want. Most of sort of what we do now is on the computer, on the dashboard. These are things, even if you have excellent distance vision, patients are still complaining. And so what we have is some of these enhanced monofocal lenses where they increase the power of the lens as you go to the center, but you're not actually splitting light. And it gives you the ability for some intermediate, in addition to that excellent distance vision, without really compromising or having an increase in the dysphotopsia profile that can come with adding more reading. And I'd love your thoughts on this too, but it definitely is giving us excellent outcomes, especially when we do a little bit of mini mono with those lenses. But you can't really say that you will always get that intermediate vision. And I think that's an important point to bring up there. Number one, it's not an FDA sort of classification. But number two is that you are getting it in a lot of patients. And it's a lens that I personally use too. But I think it's important to say that it doesn't happen every single time for the intermediate.
Yeah, the lens we're talking about that we probably have experience with is the Eyhance that has this sort of continuous curve with, instead of just adding sort of negative spherical aberration on a fourth order level, it adds sixth order and eighth order. It's kind of a crazy optical design that just blends it in. And the bench data suggests that the accuracy or the quality of vision is darn near the same as the monofocal, but just a little bit less for that extra boost. And soon we're going to have the Bausch & Lomb lens, the Aspire, coming out. And in Europe, they've got several other models of these enhanced monofocals. Some of them have a lot of negative spherical aberration in the front. So again, it's one of these things we're going to have to see where these fit in our practice. And it all goes back to that comment you made about pupil too, what do you think about pupil size with these enhanced monofocals?
Right. I think the issue with sort of having the diffractive optic was much more pupil dependent. So that affected the pupil. So potentially these are types of lenses that won't be as pupil dependent. So for patients, they'll have really good vision, even though, let's say those really small pupils in those patients, and you're getting sort of more that intermediate, will it affect the distance vision? I personally haven't noticed it, but potentially theoretically could be an issue.
Okay, so we've had this very high level talk about spherical aberration, chromatic aberration, enhanced monofocals. But there's this other thing that happens in the clinic, and that is you aim for plano and the patient ends up plus a half or minus a half or residual astigmatism. Right. How does that all fit?
Well, I think that's the most important thing. So before we start talking about higher order aberrations, getting the spherical outcome that we need, decreasing astigmatism, and data from Baylor with you and Mitch and Lee and Julie Schallhorn also has a great paper about this, is that you want even 0.5 diopters of astigmatism can cause issues and cause blur and decrease visual quality. And again, all of these effects. So we have to be very aggressive with treating the refractive error, and especially in patients that have diffractive optics. So, it's one thing when you have a monofocal lens in terms of, the resultant, let's say, astigmatism or spherical error, but this is magnified when you're having lenses that are multifocal lenses. All of that makes such a big difference. There's an interesting study that showed for every single line of uncorrected distance visual acuity that you improve, 20% increase in happiness of these patients. So, it's the number one thing that we should do. It's the most important thing.
That puts it so well. The funny thing about astigmatism, you've touched on it, is that for the monofocal IOLs, there are some patients that use it as a depth of focus mechanism. And so you kind of have to figure out the mentality of the patient and the desires of the patient, because my gut sense is to just nail the astigmatism. That's what I'm all about, to do that. But and I think for the multifocal extended depth of focus, it's so critical. I really agree. Mm-hmm. Well, this has really been fun talking about this. A lot of great insights on all this various technology. I think that this is a topic, again, that talk about something that we're going to be just delving into more and more and more as the technology improves, as the companies bring us new wonderful lenses, and as we as clinicians test them in our clinics and get our patients' feedback. So on behalf of Zaina and myself, thanks for watching. We look forward to seeing you for the next video. Until then, take care, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.